Hey everybody, we're going to talk today about the pattern project, the project that you are working on. This project's a little bit different than our other assignments in that you're creating something that can be reproduced infinitely. It's not defined by the boundaries like the book project or a poster project would be, where it needs to be printed within a certain bleed zone and all of that. For this project, we're doing elements that can be gridded off and then tiled together to create a repeated pattern. And you can imagine this pattern in a variety of different applications. So it can be something for the screen, but it can also be textile. And then, of course, it can be, you can think about it like wallpaper or wrapping paper. And that's really up to you deciding which direction you want it to go in terms of using your pattern as an application. So I just pulled up a couple quick ones here to get you started thinking about the pattern. The pattern needs to be something that when it runs off the edge meets on the other side, if that makes sense. So this artist probably created this within a grid, and then I'm going to show you how to set it up. Took those individual little units and then made them to where you could take that and repeat it, and then also take that and repeat it, and infinitely tile the things together. So the thing to remember with the pattern is just that you need to have clean slices on the images that you bring into your pattern. So in this case, the skull and the crow. Notice how where the crow comes in on the right side, where I'm kind of hovering my mouse, it meets over here, or I should say the left side meets the right side. Okay. And what they did, they created that crow. Maybe they drew it in Illustrator or some Adobe program, and then they used the rectangle tool to drag over, select, cut, and then slice. You're also going to want to use your measuring bars that you pull down to kind of to make sure that it lines up perfectly. So it's a little bit of trial and error, as you'll find. It doesn't always line up perfectly, but using those little arrow tools on your keyboard, moving them one pixel at a time, that's going to help you out. So we're working with Photoshop today, but you can certainly do this project with Illustrator if you want to. Here's another Halloween pattern. You can see the bats and the skulls. Again, the same idea. Notice where on the right hand side, see the bat's wing goes off the edge of the page. It meets it perfectly over here on the left side. So if this was taken and repeated and tiled together, it would hopefully line up perfectly, and you wouldn't be able to see the edges, the beginning and the end. Okay? That's just a couple things to get you thinking about it. We're going to create a new document, and we're going to set those parameters at 9 inches by 9 inches. You can do any other proportion that you want as long as it can be divided up nicely. I always tell people 9 by 9 works for me. You can go 12 by 12. If you want to have 4 instead of 3 increments, it's totally up to you. Make sure those pixels, 300 pixels per inch or above. Everything else looks good. And I started with a solid color. Of course, you can start with white and build on top of that. And then I'm going to go into my view, and we have our extras options, and I want to see, you can see the grid if you want to go that way. This is a project very much about increments, and using those little tiny units to measure things out may be helpful. Certainly don't have to have that if you don't want to. Rulers need to be on. They already were on. But let's do it just so that you can see how you go through the steps. We're going to add the rulers in, and you need an option here where you can, I'm going to switch from pixels to inches so that it's a little easier. You need to be able to measure stuff out for this assignment. And as you know from our previous assignments, hopefully you can hover your move tool over the ruler area and drag in and set those guidelines, and you want to be real precise about it. I'm going to set them at 3-inch marks. So I've got 3 across, hitting 6 across, and then 9. And I'm going to do the same from top to bottom. If you have snap on, it's probably going to lock those in place. Seems like maybe I do. I don't always like snap, but sometimes it's helpful. So this is sort of what you should be seeing right now. Let me go ahead and get rid of the the grid, just so you can see a clean version of my screen here. This is the way you're going to start out your project. Looks a little different than the previous ones because everything needs to be fairly laid out evenly and of course symmetrically. And then from here you're going to build in your pattern, and you can do that in any number of ways. You can pick out which particular spot you want to work with. For me, I kind of like, let's just start with the center. How about that? And since I've got sort of a pinkish color going on here, let me just really quickly see if I can draw a heart icon. And we're going to think about this as a Valentine's Day pattern. Work with that heart icon so that you can see it's on its own layer. It's real easy to move. It's real easy to resize and all that sort of good stuff. And reshape. So anything that's in the boundaries of the heart needs to be floating, right? And anything that's in the middle is a little bit easier because once you've set that icon, you can take it and repeat it. Just holding down the Option key as I drag. Repeat it, and it's not going off the edge of the boundary, so it's not a big deal. You still obviously want the heart to be exactly in the same spot as all of them. So if you need to do sublines here, if I'm going to drag down my guideline, you can see that it's not exactly the same. And so now I'm just clicking the move tools, going back to my original layers here, clicking the move tools, moving stuff up, and then using that guideline just to kind of make sure it's in the right spot. This one goes down a little bit. If I was going to be real precise about it, as I should be if I was actually making a pattern and not a super quick demo, I would also drag my rulers over this way, and I would line them up to make sure they're exactly the same. Couple clicks under the inch mark is what it looks like it would be. But I'm in a hurry, so don't waste too much of your time. So we're going to just kind of eyeball it for now. But I think you get the idea, and that's the main thing. Okay, the last thing I want to cover is just to how have objects that go off the edge. So we've got our corners that are important, right? And always want to have our layers tab on Option or on View here, because we're going to continue to build on top of that. And let's just start with another shape. I'm going to leave my hearts alone. Another shape. Going to build a new layer on top. And let's start with a, come on now, Photoshop's being slow. Let's do just a word, just some text in there. Mix it up a little bit. Okay. Something like that. Now I can't slice that text in half, right? Because it's in text mode. So I need to go to type, and I need to rasterize that type layer. What that means is it takes it out of text mode and converts it to pixel mode. So if I zoom in, I can see it's now constructed out of individual pixels. I'm going to rotate it a little bit just to give it a little bit of, little tweaks that you make to your pattern. Once they're amplified and repeated, they work really well because you see those little variations turn into what looks like motion or movement. Okay, so I'm going to take my Valentine's. It's going to spill over the edge of my line. And then you kind of got to decide exactly where you want it to be. Let's put it right on the T. And remember, you got your navigator, so you can move in and out and really perfect that. But that's an easy cut spot that I know that, okay, right where the edge of the T hits. That's an easy cut spot. I can drag down another ruler marker so that I know that if I take this Valentine's and I drag it over, now I can get it exactly in the same spot. Right? So now it lines up, the S's line up on my guideline, and then going in the other direction, the guideline hits exactly where that T hits, and that's my slice mark. Okay, so hopefully that makes sense. Now here's where you need to imagine things going off and continuing. I'm going to take my Valentine's, I'm going to click, hold down, and drag. And now it's going to get a little bit more interesting because it's going off the page. And we still want to look for that T, the edge of that T as my cut mark, or spillover mark in this case. And I'm just hitting my individual arrow keys to move it 1 pixel at a time. And you can kind of get it exactly where you want it. Now let's drag down a ruler and make sure from the top part that that also hits. So I'm a little bit low. So now I'm going to use my up arrow key, and that should be lined up pretty perfectly. Maybe one spot over like that. Okay, now I'm going to take my Valentine's and let's go the other direction. We know it's got to hit the S at the bottom of the S for that guideline. Then we know it's got to hit the T. Okay, if you can see that. So now right where my mouse is hovering, we've got where it's hit the T there, the T there, the T there. So now it's spilling over the edge, and we should have something that works pretty well. Okay, and I can move the guidelines if I need to see what this looks like now. Okay. Incidentally, you're going to want to get used to merging layers together for this project because you're going to create so many different layers. And so I've got text in here. What if I added my hearts in here, or little Cupid icons, or little abstract doodles, whatever I wanted to do. The more you add into the pattern, the more depth it's going to have, the more the more it's going to work for this project. But now I've got my Valentine's, what I think they're all lined up. I'm going to save myself a little bit of work. First of all, let's get rid of the hearts because we don't need those right now. That was more of just an example to show you how to have an object floating in the middle. But now we're getting more sophisticated. The pattern's spilling over the edge. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hide every layer that I don't want to merge together. So I want to merge just the text, right? Okay, so select one of the visible text layers. Now you go to the 3 or the 4 little bars right there. You click that, and there should be the option to merge visible. Okay, if you can see that, merge visible, and it smashes all the layers together. Now all of the text, the Valentine's text layers are combined into one. So you can imagine why that's helpful, because now instead of having to repeat those individual little letters over and over again, I can take my pattern, I can drag all of that off. Notice how it slices the edges off too. I can drag all of that off and repeat it. Okay, and then I can do it again, of course, on the screen recording apparently. So I did jump ahead just slightly, but I think that you should be able to have the information to get you started. And then I went ahead and did a couple more minutes of work just to show you where we are at this point, so that I can fit it within the time zone that I'm allotted. But anyway, you can see that what I've done is we've spilled off the edges, we repeated, copied the layers, those were merged together, and then I just simply added in guidelines. I pulled them down so that you can see that. Let me pull it back off the screen so you can see. I pulled that down, and then I just measured it because even measuring is always easier for me. So I went with the 1/2 inch marks there. So we went to 0, I went down 1/2 inch, and then I went to the 3-inch mark, which was the next level down. Create another line that was also 1/2 inch down. So we're at the 3.5 inch mark. Went down to 6 and then pulled another at 6.5. That's just so that I know that where my contact points are, like where the V hits the guideline, that's all exactly in the same spot. Okay, and then for the so that takes care of the vertical. But as far as the horizontal, I know they're lined up because I used my edge marks. If you remember, we did that where the point on the T hits, it goes off the edge. I had that, made sure that I hit that on the guidelines that are going in the opposing direction, so that you can see that all of these now, if I take this, save it as a JPEG or whatever format I'm saving it in, and then repeat it out, it's going to be an endless pattern. Okay, so this is very simple. I just focused on this spilling over, got rid of my heart drawings, but you can add in layers and layers and certainly make it more complicated and more interesting than what I'm doing here. I just really wanted to get you started. I know that some of you were unsure about even how to set the project up. So hopefully you know now setting up the project 9-inch increments, using your guidelines, and then layering in information for your pattern to get you started. If you have any questions, you can always shoot me an email. Be glad to work with you. I'm excited to see what you come up with for this project, and best of luck.